Everybody, welcome to the Economies and Neighbourhoods Scrutiny panel. My name's Councillor Harpreet-Uppal, so I'm the new Leeds member for the panel, and I just want to start off with everyone introducing themselves, if that's okay. Sheila, do you want to start?
Sheila Dykes from the Governance Service.
Illy Ogden, Scrutiny Co-opty.
Chris Friend, Co-opty. Councillor Richard Eastwood from Linley.
Councillor Yusra Hussain, Batley West.
Richard Murgatroyd, Golka Ward.
Councillor John Taylor, Kirkburton Ward. Martin Bolt, Murfield Ward.
Simon Taylor, Head of Development and Master Planning.
Okay, thank you everybody. It's my first time chairing a panel, so please do bear with me. I'll be trying my best today. We have also been joined by cabinet members, so we'll bring them in as discussions continue under the agenda. So I just want to start off with the agenda. We've got minutes of the previous meeting. Any comments, or is someone happy to approve the minutes? Yeah? Richard's approved them. We've got any? Yeah? Okay, perfect. Great stuff. Is there any interest that panel members need to declare? No? Okay. There is a form, so if you do realise you do need to declare anything, please do fill in the form and pass it on to Sheila, our governance officer. So the meeting is taking place in public, so members of the public are able to attend. We don't have any deputations or petitions. Public question time. We don't have any specific questions at this stage, but we do have members of the Youth Council joining us today, and they will be inputting into the town centre blueprint discussion. So thank you very much for joining us today. We've also got a couple of students shadowing today as well, so welcome as well. Thank you. Okay, so we've got quite a packed agenda, so we're going to move straight on to the Huddersfield Town Centre blueprint. We've got Simon here with us today. He's going to give us a quick sort of overview, and I'll move him along if we need to, because I know there's going to be a lot of discussion on this today. So off you go, Simon.
Okay, good morning everybody. Yes, I'll do this as quickly as I can. Most of this is, in fact, all of this is set out in your report, so I won't be saying anything too new. The key things really are to sort of go through some of the national trends around town centres, compare that with some of the local stuff, just touch on the objectives from the blueprint, and then just outline to you what our next stages of consultation stroke engagement, because I know there'll be a bit of debate about what those two really mean. So I just want to put this into a little bit of context. I've set this out in the report. Got some information from the British Retail Consortium about town centre footfall and vacancies. Vacancy rates nationally are around about 10.2%, so that's taking every town centre as a whole. So some will be 90%, some will be 0%. You're clustering around that 10% area. Certainly high street footfall, which is a really important indicator of how vibrant places are, has declined over the last few years. In the last year, it's declined nationally by 1%. The year before that, it dropped by 4%. So that would have felt quite significant at that time. Retail parks, not necessarily in the same position, but the footfall there is fluctuating quite a bit over time. And shopping centre retail footfall, that's also declined as well. If we move to the Huddersfield picture, and that's what I'm concentrating on today, in terms of vacancy rates, our average is around 17%. We've had a bit of an additional vacant floor space earlier this year, because we take these counts in about October every year. Another 1,500 square feet of floor space there to be added into the mix. Some pockets where vacancies are really high. 43% around Piazza Shopping Centre, Packle Centre at 30%. This is not uncommon. This is a national trend, and I think I can see one or two people here that were at our launch event, and certainly Bill Grimsey was painting that picture of a change, a revolution in retailing, so we can't expect things to go back the same, which is why we need to do something different. Huddersfield Town Centre footfall, this was well publicised as a result of this report in the Examiner this week. I think probably the significant one there is the Saturday footfall. That looks like it's declining by about 24% over the years. Market day and non-market day footfall are also decreasing, certainly from around about 2015. Prior to that, it was a bit up and down. So we're mimicking what's going on nationally, a bit more severe in places, probably a bit less so in others. Market trade, certainly we've seen a bit of hit on the market. Number of stalls now reduced from 150 in 2010 to below 2019, so a third of our market stalls are not being used. Pedestrian footfall as a result is going down as well. Blueprint objectives, and I'm going through this really quickly. We've got a number of key objectives. This idea of culture, art, leisure, and a decent evening and nighttime offer is really important and central to the theme of the blueprint. We want the businesses to thrive, so that means we need to put business infrastructure in there. We've already seen the rollout of City Fibre, which means connectivity to high-speed broadband is really important to those, attracting to more businesses into town. We want to create a place where people want to live, so a residential element, be it students or young professionals or others, is really important. We need life in the town. We need to make sure that the access to the town is right, so thinking about how people come in by bus, by train, by cycle, walking in from close range, make sure we get all those bits right, but importantly, car parking plays a part in all of that as well, making sure that we've got decent quality car parking facilities. Put public spaces here. What I mean by that is public ground, which is probably a bit too technical, but it is the spaces that link the town together. Are they high quality enough? St George's Square is a good quality town space. Got other bits, but they're not of the same standard. We want to create more, and we want to increase the standard across the piece, so you can move around the town centre in a quality, safe environment. The journey so far has been quite long. We did a lot of work last year with town centre stakeholders. We had 30, 40 different businesses, different representative groups come in at the early stage of the blueprint work, telling us what their concerns were, what their aspirations were, and we've been using that to shape the first iteration of the blueprint. A lot of technical officer support was overlaid onto that, so can we do this? You know, what are the technical issues? You know, what are the issues for sort of highway services, environmental health? To try and get a sort of technical input into that. Did a short member workshop earlier this year, see what members were thinking, whether we could actually align some of that earlier thinking with what members were saying, and then we finally launched the blueprint on the 26th of June, and we've had quite a bit of press coverage since then. In terms of next stages, from the 8th of July onwards, which was a week ago, we have been rolling out 3 or 4 strands of engagement stroke consultation. They're all set out in the report. We are conducting face-to-face interviews using the Place Standard tool, and Joe has quite kindly circulated some graphics around that. You might want to talk to us about that. We are targeting some key sectors. I'll come to that in a moment. We've set up a blueprint website. I can show you that later. We've got a questionnaire now live online, which went live recently, where we're collecting up people's views. We've got a blueprint shop that opened on the 8th of July down at the Piazza, and we're hopeful that we can get that running on Saturdays as well, which is important. And then a number of individual scheme and project initiatives that are being consulted on as well as the overarching strategy. So the key one at the moment is Cross Church Street. Place standard tool, I'm not sure that everybody knows a lot about this. I know, Councillor Taylor, you're using it in Shepley, not Shelley, as it says in the report. My mistake. But it's a useful way to get under the skin of the community, a set of set questions, and that is sort of outlined on those printed sheets there, just for information. That'll allow us to benchmark aspirations, views of a much wider audience against what has been put forward in the blueprint. We can use that information to perhaps adjust things a bit later on, but also trying to confirm or sort of unconfirm whether we're doing the right sorts of things. Focus groups, aligned to the Place Standards tool, all sorts of individual groups being asked the same sets of questions. So some of these groups are quite hard to get to. I've listed a whole load there that we are targeting through this process, some of which are familiar to me and some of which are probably not. Some of them are quite bespoke, but we're trying to reach out as far as we possibly can, and this process will go on for about 2 to 3 months. Got our shop, which has all the information, and it's staffed with council officers who can answer questions. We also have presence online, and I'm hoping that this works. Does it work? Yes, just about. Did it come up? So we have got an online questionnaire there now that people can fill in. There are paper copies in the shop as well, which we are encouraging people to fill in, and we can input into the process. This whole exercise will last till September, maybe a little bit longer if that's what we feel that is required. But hopefully we're going to come back with views. We're going to look again at the master plan to see whether it needs another iteration based on those views. So that is where we are with our engagement and consultation process at the moment. We hope that we are capturing as many people as we possibly can. We think we are. I suppose today's about discussing about how we can do things slightly differently, better, add something into it. But I'm open to suggestion, and I'm sure Cabinet members are too. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Appreciate that. Councillor Bragg, do you want to say anything at this stage, very quickly?
I'll pick up on things. I think there'll be lots of interesting questions, and I'd like maybe develop some of Simon's ideas.
Thank you for that. Members? Yep, Richard?
Yeah, thanks. Well, obviously, we've got a number of different elements here, delineated by the kind of letters. So I just wanted to. I'll try and pick up in order then. I have actually got a number of questions, but anyway, we'll try and take them in order so you're not swamped by too many. But the first one is the just an issue around the statistical data that you've provided. So this is on page 9 and 10 of the report. I mean, basically, there's always an issue with statistics, you know, as Disraeli said, lies, damned lies and statistics. But I just want, what you've done is you're comparing the Huddersfield vacancy rate of 17% with the UK one of 10%. And, I mean, obviously, that's an aggregated figure that covers a wide range of different economies and communities. I just wondered how Huddersfield compares with comparable northern towns in a similar post-industrial kind of, you know, more similar kind of demographics. And also, I'd be pretty curious actually to know how it compares with Batley and Dewsbury as well. I don't know if you've got those statistics to hand. But yeah, so that would be my question on that. How do you want to do this, Harpreet? Do you want to take it? Do you want to take it in bits, or do you want me to plough on? So I've got some further questions. But look at different aspects of this. Okay. Well,
I'll just answer that one. I think it might be useful for us to come back to you with a sort of table to try and compare different centres across the north. Some authorities are not collecting the data, and we've certainly cut back in recent years. I think we're fairly comparable to places like Wakefield and Oldham and Barnsley. Not so sure about Halifax at the moment. In terms of Dewsbury and Batley, Dewsbury has higher vacancy rates. We know that. Batley, we're not necessarily collecting all the right data on. So I think it's probably something that we could come back fairly quickly on with a table with northern towns. If we can get where we can get that data, we'll provide it for you. But it's a good point. One sort of anecdotal piece of information that I might share with you is that when we did the High Street Funds bid, I didn't feel that we were as severely affected as some others. There are certainly other towns that have higher vacancy rates than us. So that was my feeling. I haven't got any evidence of that, but that was my feeling, that 17% felt quite low actually. And actually I was quite surprised that it was around that. I thought it might be a bit higher, but...
Any other members want to come in? Ailey?
Hello. On that point on statistics, I wondered if you had any information on why and the reasons behind there's been less footfall. So, for example, the drop last year of 4%, do we have any evidence of why this has happened and the root causes? And in addition to this, I think when comparing similar towns, can we look at any case studies of examples of towns that are thriving and what they have done, especially if they've managed to turn themselves around? What have they done and what's been successful, and also what has failed? Are there any case studies?
I think we can do that. In terms of the case studies, certainly we pick up on one or two things for you there. There's a good example in the Teesside area, Stockton-on-Tees, that has done a lot of work around its town centre vibrancy. Based on lots and lots of events, they pride themselves in events 365 days of the year. So that is a tactic that town has used to great success. In terms of the background to it, I don't know if you're familiar with the Grimsey Review. A guy called Bill Grimsey has written a couple of documents over the years around the decline of town centres, and his latest one was produced in 2016. Certainly the causes of retail decline, which occupies most floor space in the town, are well documented by Mr Grimsey. So around the rise of internet shopping, it's a rise of sort of lower incomes. It's certainly well documented there that middle income sector is actually contracting all the time, so people have got less money, and actually people are also not spending as much on goods anymore. They want an experience, and I think they're the three things that he quite clearly highlights as a bit of a revolution in sort of retailing and shopping and town centres as the root cause for the decline across the country.
Is last year's 4% though, is that a significant decline? I realise it's been a long-term trend, but is last year's 4% a significant trend that we can look into?
Yeah, we can look into that. I'm not sure why it was so severe in that particular year, but we look back into that. It has been downwards all the time, and a marked drop in that particular year. Yeah, and a marked drop in that particular year.
I think I've got Richard and then John. Okay.
Yeah, on the statistics again, I was just wondering if you're able to clarify the percentage between privately owned empty properties and those actually owned by the council.
Yeah, we can produce those for you, but I don't have them to hand. I think we just asked to give some headline figures for this particular exercise, but if that's what you require, we can do that. Yeah.
Okay, we'll send Simon a list of actions after the meeting and try and get the actions for the next meeting. Okay. John, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I mean, like Richard, I've got a number of points, number of comments. So just start off with one, and our objective with this is to get more people to come into the town centre and to use our town centre. I think it's an admirable attempt to do that and plan and think there's a lot of good work in this. The one thing that I worry a little about that is almost potentially a blockage to that, we talk about a quality environment with fewer vehicles. That will only work if people have ways to get into town. And certainly from the south of the town, the areas that I represent, you talk about public transport. There is very little public transport. You talk about transport for the North strategy. That makes no mention of Sheffield and links through to Sheffield. And of course we have a train line that runs through from Huddersfield through the south of Huddersfield out towards Sheffield, but there's no mention of that in the plan. So my concern is, I think this is all great. It's excellent what we're suggesting we should be doing. But if people can't get into the town, they ain't going to come to the town. And unless we make it easier for them to get in. So having this, you've got this dilemma that either you want to have less vehicles or you want people in the town centre. You can't really have both. And at the moment you're trying to ride both horses. And there is a danger in trying to do that you won't achieve what you're attempting to achieve. Because either you have something that Kirklees or with its partners do to significantly improve the public transport. And if you look in my ward, where I can drive into the town centre in around 15 minutes, if I want to go by bus, it's going to take me over an hour. How many people realistically are going to get on a bus? And those bus services are once every couple of hours. So you're trying to ride two horses and you can't do that. And there's a danger that this plan will be flawed because we're trying to do those two things at the same time. So just any comment on that?
Okay, I think Councillor McBride's going to say something.
We're acutely aware of the significance of accessibility. Just let me remind you of accessibility in terms of public transport for Huddersfield. Huddersfield's bus station is the most used in West Yorkshire, bigger than Leeds. 31,000 people a day use it, so there's quite clearly a lot of people coming into the town by virtue of that mode. The train station is the second biggest in West Yorkshire, second only to Leeds, twice as big as Bradford. 5 million people a year use it. So huge numbers of people use public transport to come into Huddersfield and go from Huddersfield. With regard to the quality of bus services I do take your point. Since we've had a deregulated system which your government brought in 1986, it's disenabled us to provide a totally, organised, franchised, regulated system properly funded. Now, I was on the West Yorkshire County Council when we did have such a system, and when I had the most, per capita, most used system of all our metropolitan authorities here in Kirklees. So we've got to take these factors into account. As far as access by private transport is concerned into the centre of Huddersfield, according to the chairman of the Transport Committee, she thinks it's very good. And she's been around all the main centres, obviously Halifax, Wakefield, Bradford and Leeds. Relatively speaking, Huddersfield is very accessible.
I think John just wants to do a follow-up. Just quickly, youth council members, I haven't forgotten about you. We will be bringing you in as well, okay?
It'd be very interesting to see the breakdown then of the people that are using the bus services and where they're coming from. Because I suspect there will be lots of people using the bus services from certain parts of the town, but not from other parts of the town, and that's the point I'm trying to make.
I think that's a good point. I think we'll have a look and see what data we've got, but certainly you'll probably find they will come from the most accessible places. But inevitably in every area there will be some places that don't have the best access to their primary town centre. But Councillor McBride says, I think we do quite well in sort of just on pure numbers using a public transport mode to get into the centre.
Okay, I've got a few members now, so I'll start off with Martin.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Picking up on a similar theme as well. I hear what you say, Peter, about deregulation, but it must also be acknowledged that West Yorkshire Combined Authority has chosen not to take any stronger measures to improve public transport. They're in a soft partnership, which leaves the bus operators particularly with the right to do what they want and not put services on where the public need them. And I'll give you the same challenge that I gave to the Managing Director. It's true. If you just, I was on the Transport Committee, you weren't last at the meeting when it was approved. I'll give you the same challenge that I've given the Managing Director of Arriva Buses, and he's accepted that challenge. That's, if you're confident, as you say, and blowing the trumpet about the number of people and accessibility of Huddersfield, come out to Murfield, the main intersection, one of the developments that Kirklees are supporting with business-free opportunities on Moor Park. We'll set off from Moor Park. You come in to Huddersfield by public transport. I'll come in on a push bike, and we'll see who gets into Huddersfield first. Because, as has been alluded to, we did it before from the Denbydale area when the area committees were changed, and it was proven that public transport was unreliable for people to make those journeys. If I wanted to come into this meeting by public transport, it would take me far longer, and I know Richard cycles in, than on bike or by car. So you're not going to get people commuting with unreliable transport services. Because it says in the report that you're working with transport providers to make things attractive. I think we want more detail. Peter has just sort of alluded to the fact that we have no opportunity to influence. So when we make a statement like that in the document, I'd like to see what we are doing to work with those transport providers, not only to make it attractive, but to make it useful to people. John's alluded to something like a Venn diagram showing the routes coming into Huddersfield and where people are coming from, which would show where the gaps are for people in Kirklees getting into Huddersfield. The same paragraph, 2.17, talks about that you're serious about reducing the impact of vehicles. 18 months to 2 years ago, the then leader of the council, Councillor Sheard, broke down on his way into Huddersfield, and I gave him a lift in. As we came out of the multi-storey car park, I highlighted to him that the council's cycle lockers had a number of damages. The locks were broken, they were in a poor condition. He said, I'll get it sorted, that should be no problem. If anybody wants to have a look when you go out of here, you'll find that those lockers are still broken and it is a problem. So perhaps Councillor Shear has moved on. We now have this seriousness about improving walking and cycling. Can we have the town centre lockers improved to the standard that Huddersfield Town Centre should be? Simon mentioned car parking, and in terms of statistics, I'd like to see some data about what the demand for car parking is within the wider Huddersfield area. I know some of the car parks are outside the ring road, and what the capacity is. Because at one time I used to want to use the new leisure centre when there were problems across at Spenborough and that. The problem is, during the working day, the car park adjacent to the leisure centre is full of people who are working. So people who want to use the leisure service haven't got sufficient car park, and I think that's a problem we have to identify, that we can't assume. I mean, the same situation applies down at the stadium. You've got a 24,000 capacity stadium and 2,000 car parking spaces. So we need to see what the demand is and what's the capacity. But I'm sure many of us would like to see Huddersfield and Kirklees having fewer cars, so we need to look at the issues of having better transport links for vulnerable users, parking when you get here, and that the electric charging that's mentioned is not only for electric cars. Electric bikes are a growing market. There's a shop just opened in Leeds last week in anticipation of the World Championships, and one of their key ranges is electric bikes. But you will find that there is nowhere that you can go at the moment, and again I've raised this at West Yorkshire, that if you arrive by an e-bike, either through age, infirmity, or just not wanting to pedal as hard, you can't charge it then when you go home. And that should be something that I know Councillor Firth used to lead on the electric vehicle things at West Yorkshire level. Plenty of spaces for electric charging. You know, many supermarkets have them built in for cars, but there's not the same for e-bikes. So we need to be consistent.
Do you want to come back on any? There was quite a bit mentioned there by Martin. So.
Okay, there was quite a lot there. Just generically, yeah, there are things around the town that do need to be repaired and fixed, and we all acknowledge that. And colleagues in highways are busy trying to sort out signage, bike lockers as well will be put on that agenda. So we're acutely aware of that, and that is one of the basics that we were trying to get across in the messages at the launch. Was doing the basics right is really, really important. So clean streets, repaired streets, safe streets as well, really, really important. So we acknowledge all of that. Car parking, yes, there is a big issue around car parking that we need to understand better. We have kicked off a Dewsbury and Huddersfield parking study so that we understand usage, quantity, quality, and also looking at technology as well. So that is ongoing at the moment. So people who probably use car parks in the town will have been questioned by a company doing the surveys at the moment. We're doing lots of counting work as well. So we will report on that later on in the year. I think it's due to complete around the end of the year. So we'll have all that much better data so that we can look at what we need to provide, who's using what. And it might help us put together a strategy around sort of appropriate tariffs and how we might introduce things like electric charging points for cycles and for cars in some of those car parking areas. So we're looking at that holistically, running alongside our regeneration programme set in the blueprint.
Sorry, I can't remember if you mentioned the cycle lockers. Is that something we can look into just to make sure?
Certainly can. I did mention it. We can put that on the list and take that back to Will Acornley.
Okay, I've got a few people coming in. It might be quite helpful maybe to take a few of the points together and then ask colleagues to come in. Otherwise, I think if we're going back and forth, we might not get everyone's points. So I've got Richard, Chris, Yusra, and then John. Okay, so Richard.
Okay, so what I'm going to ask about actually refers to both the consultation aspect of this document set out on page 11 and 12. That's 2.7 onwards, and also that's the blueprint objectives. So it's the objectives and the consultation because they do segue together in reality. So in terms of the objectives, so it sets out a number of objectives, and in 2.17, which I think John's just and Martin have alluded to, we've got a quality environment with fewer vehicles. And I think we'd all agree this is absolutely crucial, the issue about transport. I won't say any more because I think it's been kind of dealt with. However, what I would have to ask about is really how this relates to the whole process, because let's just have a little bit of context. Cement and concrete is basically 8% of all CO2 and climate gas emissions arise from cement and concrete globally, 6% in Britain. And unless that's reduced, then that means that the UK will not be able to reach its commitments under the Paris Agreement. That industry alone, cement and concrete, okay? So that means we will be facing climate change of over 2 degrees, and we all know what the consequences of that will be. So, therefore, my question really relates to the issue of how has there been in terms of the town centre plan, has there been an assessment done of the amount of cement and concrete that potentially could be used with this kind on the scale of the plans proposed, okay, and the CO2 implications of those. That'll be my first question. And my other question is, obviously, as a council, we're committed to reusing, reducing and recycling. And I would suggest that that essential principle, which we will have to apply if we're going to reach our commitments and protect our children's future, then that essential kind of principle should also apply to buildings. So my question would be, has a consideration been given about reusing existing buildings as well in terms of the master plan? And my final question really relates to consultation, because we've got a list of potential consultees on page 14, 2.24, and obviously the council has declared a climate emergency. And in that motion in January, it did say that issues around climate change were going to be considered in every major policy issue. Okay, so my question really, in terms of consultation, I don't see existing environmental groups in this list, and I also, at the moment, the Climate Change Working Party is considering looking at ideas around developing a lead-style climate commission body again. And obviously, I would, on point 2.28, there's an ongoing post-engagement consultation process. So I suppose my question there would be, how can we integrate that ongoing urgent necessity for considering climate change issues in detail, not just warm words, but actual the specifics in terms of carbon emissions, and then how can we kind of build that into our consultation process? All difficult questions, I know, but I think we all agree that business as usual isn't an option. So.
Right, thanks. I'm just going to try and take some more questions. Is that all right? Just so we can try and get through. I've made notes. I think Joanne's making notes as well, yeah? Okay, just make sure we cover it. So we've got Chris, Yusra and John yet, and I've still got to bring in the Youth Council as well. So if we take these first, and then you come back, and then we'll get the Youth Council in on as well. So Chris, do you want to come in?
I read through this several times. Before I make any comments, I give apologies. I am a project manager by background. I'm retired now, so no longer. And there are sort of things, lots of things in here that I found very difficult to actually put any measurement on. The objectives that are listed, I'm not quite sure how you measure success against those objectives. I can't actually see any specifics or measurements there against those. So that was quite worrying. But overall, looking at the whole document, the question kept coming into my mind, which was, so what? What makes Huddersfield different to other cities around as a result of this, that people will want to come into it? I see a lot about transport links. I won't go into detail about that, but you have got a great rail service. I use it frequently to go to Leeds, to go to Manchester, to go to Halifax, to go to Bradford, not to come into Huddersfield, because we haven't got very much here. There aren't things that really attract me in Huddersfield. So I think the big question I've got overall is, what is this going to really make a difference for Huddersfield to get other people to come from Leeds, Manchester, other areas, even to want to come into Huddersfield and stay here? That's really it.
Yeah, mine's just a brief question. You mentioned earlier on and just needed some clarification about some statistics that you didn't get from Batley. Can you just elaborate on that? Because this is quite Huddersfield focused, and I'm conscious that there's no statistics around, the footfall on page 11. You've got footfall from Huddersfield Town Centre. There's Dewsbury Market, there's also Batley Market, which is reducing for some reason. So I don't want this plan to sort of impact on northern towns. So it'd be really good to have some statistics around that so we can have some measure.
Thanks, just to say, we're focusing today on Huddersfield, but I think you make a very valid point about the Batley stats, so we'll just cover that as well slightly. So, John?
Thank you. I just want to take it in a slightly different direction and talk a little bit about the consultation and place standard. I'm a huge advocate of place standard, and I've been piloting it in my own ward, so I've got probably a better understanding perhaps than other members have. one of the things about place standard that makes it very, very powerful is that what we're doing is going out and listening to the public and helping them shape the place, but they almost self-define that place. One of my little worries about this, using place standard in this context, is how are they answering those questions in relation to, because you're wanting to find out about the town centre, but for example, there's a question around public transport. How good is public transport? Are we talking about how good is public transport in the town centre? Are we talking about how good is public transport for me, living out in a rural park, getting into the town centre? Just an example, how safe do you feel? Are we talking about when you're in the town centre or in general? So I think it's a really powerful tool if used properly. There's a danger that unless we're really, really clear, and the training for those people that are going to do this listening to the public is absolutely critical about defining clearly for the member of public they're talking to about the shape of what we're talking about. And just moving on from that as well, I mean, I see the list of potential consultees. I don't know all of them, but I'm a little worried that there isn't a good age range there. And actually, we need to make sure that we're talking to people across all of ages, because that's one of the strengths as well, as making sure that you've got a wide spread of ages, genders, people with or without disability. A critical group that needs picking up is carers, and actually making sure a lot of those conversations aren't just in these groups, but are out on the street. People, stand at the bus station, stand at the railway station. When we've done it out in my ward, those are the sort. We doorstop people going into the co-op on a Friday night. We went to some sports clubs. We went to the station when there were commuters in the mornings. We went and stood outside the school gates and talked to parents as they were picking kids up and things like that. So we need to make sure we've got that range, because this feels a little similar-ish. There's a lot of young people involved in a lot of those areas, and we need to make sure not only do we understand the people who are currently using the town centre actively, what about those who aren't? And the point about the bus station and the train station, and the point that was just made is very, very valid. How many of those people using those bus stations and train stations are using them transitory to get from where they are into Huddersfield to go somewhere else, not spend time in Huddersfield? So we need to capture those people and understand those as well.
Thank you, everyone. Very good points. I've got some more people who want to come in, but I don't want to overload Simon and colleagues at once. If you want to take those points for now, and then I'll take another round if that's okay. Did you want to? Okay, that's fine. So we'll let Simon, and then we'll bring you in.
Thank you for that, Councillor Walker. I probably do need a little bit of help, but there's quite a lot here. Can I just go in reverse? The place standard tool, you're absolutely right. Used properly, this is going to be really powerful. I think maybe the report probably doesn't set out quite as clearly what we are doing. We will be doing general face-to-face in the town centre in various locations, as many as we can, which is why it's done over a long period. So we're doing stuff around the library, bus station, sports centre, all those sorts of places. It's a good point about how do we capture those people not using the town, and I think we need to take that point back. That might be quite a difficult one. Certainly on the list here of sort of target focus groups, they are in addition to the general on-street face-to-face questionnaires. If you've got suggestions, we can add that to the list, take that back to Vina's team. And yeah.
Into that as well. Value of having a shop as well is that we're getting groups coming into the shop. You particularly mentioned about carers, disability groups. In the first week of the shop opening, we had 3 groups come in from those groups, and we're setting up additional focus groups with those and trying to build into their networks as well.
Actually, can we talk afterwards? 'Cause I wouldn't mind coming and helping a little bit, just with my experience. And then one other group to think about is employers who are based in the town. So we actually went into employers and spent time, go and spend some time in the canteen or that kind of thing as well.
Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor Taylor. We'll pick that up with you after the meeting. I was just trying to go backwards over in terms of the data. Yeah, we'll do our very best to get the Dewsbury stuff and the Batley stuff into a format with loads of other stuff that was requested at the beginning. So we'll pick that up. Can I touch on the so what question? I think today's session was about future engagement, some headlines about declining town centres. If you go onto the website that sets out the blueprint, the key thing within the blueprint is to create a unique offer for Huddersfield around the cultural heart. That means a number of elements. One is a new town centre park where the Piazza area is at the moment. That's pretty well documented now. Also a better library facility, new museum facility and a potentially new archive facility. But also the ability to create what we're calling a sound space, a new music venue for the town centre. So we're trying to cater for all sorts of different levels. That will be the key attractor to the town. But also in other parts of the town centre, make sure we create the right environment for new housing, new business opportunities as well. So that area around St Peter's has a lot of regeneration potential within its existing buildings, ripe for residential conversion. Certainly there is at least one site that could be cleared and new residential go on it. And we've also investigated the opportunity for small start-up co-working space in that area as well. So it's about a variety of uses coming into the town so that it's not a retail-dominated centre, because it won't be a retail-dominated centre anymore. No centre will be like that. It's also about how we recreate our market offer as well. So in terms of setting us apart from other towns, it is that Piazza cultural heart element. It is around a new market offer, and it is about a town that lives and works as well. So they're the things that we're hoping to sort of set ourselves up to do, and also make a unique mark against the other competing towns. Talked about people who want to come in from other areas. I think our first port of call is to retain Huddersfield, Kirklees residents. We want to stop them from slipping away to Leeds and Manchester. It's a big ask, that is, but I think we're on that journey to do that. I don't know if anybody from Cabinet wants to add to that.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. Just to add a little bit more to the cultural offer and the cultural quarter that we're looking to develop. The three of us were delayed a few minutes getting down to the meeting because we've just had an hour or so looking specifically at the work that's happening there. And again, there's an awful lot of consultation taking place about this. One of the questions I asked this morning was the degree to which the development of this quarter is going to be based on local groups, local people, local ideas, and the degree to which we need to bring people in from outside. And the view that emerged, I think, was it's really important that it is very much focused on the community. We're not bringing in culture for people. We're looking at developing a cultural offer with the people and with the bodies that already exist within Kirklees, within Huddersfield, particularly for this aspect of it. The work that's been done in other parts of the country suggests, I've read a number of studies recently about this, and it does tend to suggest that the more you can involve local people in formulating this and making this happen, the more likely it's going to be successful in the longer term. You can parachute in big events, but if you've no backup for that, no long-term sustainability strategy, it's not going to work. In terms of the kind of things that we're doing, music is obviously going to be a very big focus with the move towards Music 2023, which is going to be part of the overall Leeds City Region cultural event. But we intend to have a very extensive offer and very high quality offer within Kirklees, linked to the development of facilities and so on that will be sustainable into the future. So there's the whole issue of what's going to happen within the cultural quarter, what's going to happen to the Queensgate market. We're not looking at just one big venue. We're looking at a range of spaces within that area. We're looking at flexibility. We're looking at things that will bring in people at different times of the day, different parts of the community. It's a really big issue. You could probably do a session just looking at cultural developments. Then you've got obviously the art galleries, the libraries, what's happening with the theatres, what's happening with cultural things on a smaller scale in other parts of the town. It's a very big agenda, but there's a lot of work happening, and it's all based on working with people, not imposing something upon them.
Okay, I've got quite a few people wanting to come in, so I know we've got Peter and Naz, but I do want to just come back to the points that have been raised, and then we'll bring you guys in. Is that okay?
Okay, so the other issue on my list, because there's quite a lot, was the sort of climate change issue. I think at the moment you've delved into a level of detail that we probably haven't got yet. Colleagues in other parts of Naz Parker's area and Angela Blake's area are working on the climate emergency strategy. So inevitably, construction of this scale is going to be a part of that strategy. There are some movements in terms of building regs around sort of public buildings being zero carbon as well, and I'm assuming that's going to include construction impacts as well. So it's a good point. It is an all-council matter rather than just the town centres issue. And I think it will be picked up, because I'm pretty sure that it will get raised in lots of other forums across the council for lots of different reasons.
I mean, I take, in terms of specifics, because I did raise a number of specific issues. So the first specific issue I raised was around the issue of actually measuring carbon. I take your point that it's, it's early days in terms of aspiration. But having said that, these various plans and so on, I assume that, there's been some level of surveying being done, and that would presumably have some kind of potential means of measuring the amount of cement, concrete and energy that would be required. In fact, I'm sure it does. Yeah. So that's the first thing. So that should be something I think the people of Kirklees need to be told about and know about in terms of how that relates to, plans and so on. The second issue I raised specifically was about consultation, both in the immediate term, where we've got our short-term consultation, and in the longer term, in terms of engagement with this plan. So I suppose I did actually, just highlighted that issue about some of the consultees here. And, there's actually, not just local, but nationally, there's been some tremendous work being done around this whole issue of the impact of building on the climate emergency, which I won't repeat the points, but it's actually one of the biggest sectors globally. So on those specific points, please.
Okay, just on the engagement exercise, I think we can go back to Vina and see whether we can get any particular groups involved from that perspective to draw those sorts of comments in. I suspect as we move forward over the lifespan of the blueprint, we're going to have many consultation engagement exercises that we can pick up this sort of issue on a consistent basis. I can't really answer the more specific question about measuring the impacts. I think that is probably something that will come out of our contractual work with construction operators as we move into the building phase, and certainly we're working up different frameworks, and if we want to be responsible developer, then they're the sorts of things that we will look at. I don't know if Peter wants to add to that.
A lot to what's been said. Just taking the issue of consultation, we've got to immense pains to try and widen the scope of contact with the public. The point's well taken that we need to get to as many people as we possibly can to get the real feel for what the people want. However, there has been a great deal of consultation with others in reaching the point we are now. This has been a 10-year journey. I've been all over the country looking at different towns. I've been to Nottingham. I've had reciprocal visits from Middlesbrough, the leaders of Middlesbrough. Been here. I've taken a scrutiny group 3 or 4 years ago to Middlesbrough. We've been to Nottingham. We've been to Barnsley. I've personally been to Manchester, Liverpool, the whole of the Transpennine route to look at what succeeds. I also listened very carefully to what our peers said last week, and they said, you've got exactly the right ideas, you've got massive potential. One of your weaknesses in Kirklees is you don't boast enough about your achievements. You don't exploit your potential sufficiently. And they pointed out the wonders of our architecture. They pointed out the wonders of the great range of musical opportunity and so on, which we, of course, are well aware of, but we don't tell the public sufficiently about what we're good at. I think with regard to climate change, Richard, yes, we're acutely aware of that too. But the most important factor in damaging the climate, of course, is traffic. The private car. Well, 37% of all carbon comes from traffic. 37%. It's by far the biggest factor. Now, what we're doing to make our traffic lights more intelligent, get the traffic moving more quickly, reduces that factor. What we're doing to encourage people to go onto public transport is critically important. It is no accident we've got the best public transport accessibility in the whole of West Yorkshire by a country mile. And those people are mainly coming to and from Huddersfield. When you see those trains coming from Transpennine, just stand on the station and see how many people get off and get on. The trains either way from Manchester and Leeds, half empty. I'm sure you've noticed that. So there's a significant movement of people by public transport. I do take the point it's not fully adequate. I would like to have a system which did fully respond to the needs of Murfield and Kirklees and areas like that. And hopefully one day we'll be able to do that. But we are a long way along the track, and as Bill Grimsey said, you've got a lot to offer here. You're on the right lines. You've picked out the critical factors which will change this town, which are living in the town, our educational provision, which is massive, and the cultural potential if you exploit that. And he said this very publicly, that there's no better town I can think of, he said, than Huddersfield in its aspiration to achieve this. And it's brought together much more than a vision, it's brought together the resource and money to make it happen, and got a clear idea of what it's doing.
Thank you, Peter. I know there's quite a lot of people that want to come in, particularly on this side over here, but I do want to bring in just a couple of bring in some more colleagues on the Youth Council who've been waiting very patiently as well, and then we'll bring all yous in at the end if you want to summarise. Is that okay? I think you've answered most of Richard's points now, Richard. Okay, we'll come back to that. So, I know I've got Ailey, but could I bring in the Youth Council first? They've just been waiting patiently. And I've got Ailey, I've got Martin, I've got John as well, and then some other people might want to come in. But let me just bring in the Youth Council members. Yeah, take your time, and we're really thankful that you're here today and appreciate that. Okay?
All right, yeah, thanks. So one thing I just want to mention is that our neighbours, Halifax and Bradford, how for example, Bradford, so we need to be taking practice or examples from them, because Halifax, they recently did up their Peace Hall. Literally next to the Peace Hall there's a library, and close by there's a cinema, so if I was to go to the cinema you know, to have a nice time. Straight after cinema, I'd go to Peace Hall, spend a bit of time there, and if I want to grab a book, you know, library's right next to it. And Bradford, they instead of going all the way to Manchester for Trafford Centre, you know, if I want to go there, or you know, me and my family, if we want to have a time shopping, Bradford, they had Bradford Broadway built in, and then literally near Bradford Broadway, not too far off, is Centenary Square, another attraction. So there's nowhere in Huddersfield where I'd go, oh yeah, I'd go to Huddersfield, you know, let's spend a bit of time there. I have relatives in Halifax and Bradford, that's why I visit there a lot, and I've noticed a lot of difference, like even in Halifax town, you know, just shopping around and spending time there, there's a lot more vibes, and then compared to Huddersfield town. Huddersfield town is in somewhere I'd spend a lot of time personally. Like, no offence, but like this is like our chance to, because we have a lot of potential here, but we're not using it like, at all. We spent a lot of money, literally, Huddersfield town. You know, the main, I don't know what it's called, but it's I have family around, and they wouldn't come to Huddersfield to spend time here because there's literally nothing to our name. Like, I don't want to be offensive, but we don't have any attractions or anything here compared to Bradford or Halifax. It's only in the space of 5 years they've done a lot and made a lot of change. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for listening.
I want to bring up a few points in regards to the quality of environment. I'm 16 and I've never used a bus since like the age of 5, and a lot of my classmates are the same. It's convenience is one thing. A lot of people would rather pay for a taxi than wait for buses. And Kirklees, I was reading the statistic, has the highest number of taxi drivers in comparison to lots of other councils. So is there something we can do in regards to that concern and try and make, like, to get around Huddersfield, I never use a bus. I mean, I use taxis, likewise my friends and mates, and I'm from a school where 42% of students are disadvantaged. So if disadvantaged students are using taxis over buses, there's definitely a concern in fair prices as well. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Very, very good points from both of you. Thank you so much. I'm going to just take a few more points. Is that all right, Simon, or do you want to come back to those now?
Can I just come back to them, because I find it quite difficult to hold 3 or 4 questions in my head at a time. The gentleman makes some great points about attractions in neighbouring town centres, and this is part of the journey we're on with our blueprint, is to create those attractions. You refer to the cinema in Halifax and the Peace Hall. We do need to rival that town. We need to rival other towns. We need to keep people here. At our launch event, Kingsgate announced that the Light Cinema were to come into the shopping centre there, so that's a good start. That will anchor people in the town. I think that's a bit of an early game changer, actually, because it's not just a new attraction that we don't have to the town. It actually is a shift towards a sort of evening time, family type economy as well, which is what we want to try and promote. So things are shifting. We have to be really patient with this. It's not going to happen overnight. I know from working at the city region that Halifax have worked on their town centre for years and years and years. It does take a long time, and that is a key message nationally, key message from sort of key orators like Bill Grimsey. Be patient. You need a 10, 15, 20-year plan to get this right. And we're on that journey now. And I think if you look back at the blueprint, we're trying to create those attractions for our town to make you want to stay here and your family to be proud of the place that they live. Just on the buses and the taxis issue, it's a difficult one for young people. I'm not 16 anymore. I do have 16-year-old children. I've got a 19-year-old as well. My experience is slightly different with them. That one of them is very happy to use the bus. The other one just wants to use taxis. So it is something we need to tackle, that culture in young people about how they move around. I do know that licenses with young people in terms of driving, those numbers are falling away, so people are less inclined to want to drive anymore. but we need to keep that momentum going and make sure that there are decent alternatives for you to get into town and to college and all those other places that you want to go. It's a big issue. It's been a big issue for a long time. How do you make public transport really, really attractive? I'm not quite sure, either outside of London and Manchester, that we've cracked that yet. And certainly we need to work with the Combined Authority in getting that right.
The Combined Authority is looking at how to further subsidise bus transport. I mean, if I had my way, I'd make public transport free for those under the age of 21. Certainly, ones not in work. And I think the priority we don't give to the youth, we do give to the elderly. I get a pass so I can go free. It seems illogical that you don't get it and I do. And I think we've got to do something to address that. Which is, again, I go back to the West Yorkshire County Council days, which we did literally, young people travelled free throughout the whole network.
Thank you. So I've got Ailey, Martin and John, and then we do need to move on to Brexit and the work programme as well. So we've got some... we have. So, okay, so Ailey, can I bring Ailey in, please?
Hi, I'm afraid I have a few points. One is that I think on page 12 of the plan, they talk about having a recognisable brand for Huddersfield, and I haven't seen what that is defined anywhere unless I've missed it. So it'd be great if there was anything about defining what this brand is and making sure it's future-proof, because quite a lot of these plans I see seem to be quite short-term, like we're asking people how they feel about the town now, but are we taking into account how behaviours will change over the next 10 years and how we would like them to change? So that's one point. I think leading on from that, on changing behaviours and how people use the space, I think the point that the gentleman from the Youth Council made about outdoors and community spaces. I didn't see anything in the blueprint online that looked particularly future-proof about outdoor community spaces and this cultural offer. So there's talk of new venues, for example, and I realise we're making, in the plan, there's plans for outdoor spaces, but essentially they seem to be a couple of parks, which I'm not sure if that's particularly innovative. I mean, I'm sure there's lots of need for them, but there seems to be parks. So are there any outdoor spaces, particularly ones that we could use as cultural spaces? And then my third point was about the traffic, which we've discussed quite a lot. But again, on statistics, is there any information on how many of these journeys are under 2 miles? So we're hearing that people would rather use a taxi than take the bus, which I'd say chances are these journeys are quite short journeys that are easily cyclable. And are there any plans around, one, finding out how many journeys are short and could easily be cycled, and two, finding out why people aren't cycling them? Personally, I cycled here, and I can tell you that it's pretty unpleasant to cycle into Huddersfield town centre, so I think that's probably why. And I think a sort of secondary point on that would be around innovation. Are there any plans to bring in communal bike hire stations like they have in many, many, many towns and growing towns, and could be potentially something across all of West Yorkshire?
Yeah, thanks for that. And those are some of the points that certainly I've been making for the last 20 years in Kirklees about trying to include cycling. Just picking up a point that Richard made a while ago about the climate emergency. One of the resolutions of Council was that reports would have an environmental impact assessment on them. And we're not seeing that coming through. And I think, again, you made many points there, Richard, that they should be on here. You know, this is one of the major policies for Kirklees. And then the environmental impact, and as I've said before, air quality impact, should feature. It was passed by Council in January. So I'm concerned as why it's not been coming through. The other thing, in developing the new offer and new retail for Huddersfield, and points have been made about impact, we had a relatively minor retail development for consideration at Mirfield Town Council yesterday, and that developer has to produce a sequential and impact test to show what the results that they would have is going to be on the local shops in Mirfield and on a wider area. I know that Kirklees don't have that capacity in-house to develop that because they're outsourcing the response to that. But for a major project like this, I'd like to see that kind of same methodology applied so that we can see we're improving the footfall, etc., would improve in Huddersfield, but at what cost to other centres, particularly in Kirklees. Yeah, we would all like to draw things back from White Rose, from Trafford Centre and other places, but as local councillors, if there's a new offer in Huddersfield, certainly I want to know what the impact is on the existing footfall in Murfield. And that's done, as I say, as part of the planning for other retail, and it should be done for a major project. The Youth Councillor made the valid point about taxis, not only the number of them that we've got, but I think we should develop that. Kirklees has not taken on the enforcement capacity for banning idling of vehicle engines. And on many taxi and private hire ranks, you'll see the vehicles sitting there for long periods with their engines idling over, contributing to CO2, NO2 and various other things. That is something that Kirklees, you don't have to necessarily take on the wider enforcement, but under licensing policy, you could tell drivers to switch off their engines while they're at the rank, so they're not polluting things. It's something that we tried at council a while ago, but it was put on the too difficult pile, and I think now, with everything else that we're looking at, then it ought to come to the forefront that these are things which we can control and influence, we license. It may be difficult to reduce the number of licensed vehicles we have, maybe it's a difficult challenge, but certainly not having them sitting there in our town and town centres, engines pumping out constantly, is something that's quite easily achievable.
Actually, to an extent builds on some of what Martin said, and I think that wider point about what are the impact on our other town centres and village centres as a result of this, so have we done that? Because there is a danger here that we have a master plan for Huddersfield, we have a developing master plan for Dewsbury. If they're developed independently or in conflict or competition, do we understand what the impact is going to be, and we may be robbing Peter to pay Paul. I also worry a little bit about some of the viability of some of our smaller market towns, whether you talk about Cleckheaton in the north or, dare I say, Murfield, or Holmfirth in the south and places like that. Will we just drag people into Huddersfield, and have we done that work? Because we are responsible for the whole of Kirklees, not just for Huddersfield, even though I'm a Huddersfield member. And my other point as well is HD1, because one of my ongoing worries about HD1 really is HD1 is dragging people out of the town centre, and we've got a conflict there that we're investing and supporting the development of HD1 at the same time trying to say we want to bring people into the town centre, and that seems to be a conflict as well in reality. And then my final point is when we're looking at the markets, I know work has been done on Dewsbury Market. We've had consultants consulting on how to improve the offering at Dewsbury Market. Are we taking those learnings and using them for the revised shaping of Huddersfield Market as well? It would just make sense, wouldn't it?
Yeah, all really good points. So if colleagues want to wrap up, don't worry, you can all come in at this stage, but we do need to move on to Brexit and the work programme as well, okay? So if you all come in to answer the questions that have been raised.
Right, I'll try to rattle through in terms of the brand, we were very fortunate to have a Huddersfield BID, Business Improvement District Group, who went to a vote and was successful in getting the bid established. So part of their remit is to start developing a brand for the town centre, and the council will participate in that. We need to dovetail together on that. At the moment there is no brand for the town, no sort of concept. I'll just go back to my Stockton-on-Tees example earlier. They pride themselves, their brand is an event 365 days a year. So we have to work on that. In terms of event space, I would disagree with you a bit about only a park. I think it is a big, bold statement about a new public space at a part of the town that doesn't have quality public space at all, and that can be used for events as well. There's other little pockets around St Peter's Gardens as well that we're trying to promote, particularly the Pet Town Park around the Piazza area. We're trying to connect that up with the Lawrence Batley Theatre, and we are trying to connect that back up with the university as well by taking down all of those buildings around the Piazza, so you have a proper draw from the university part of the town into the town centre part of the town. So those are the two key issues. I think we touched a lot on transport and traffic, and I hear your comments about cycling. I'm a cyclist myself, so yeah, I think I haven't got that to hand, but what we do know is there is a significant population within that 2-mile radius. Probably, I think was the number 10,000 within 2 miles walkable. I think about 10,000 residents that could walk into town. I have no data to hand, but I'm pretty sure that a lot of those would drive to the town, certainly, and we need to capture that. It's really important that we get them out of the cars, walking in, which means good walking routes. Cycling, a bit more controversial, but certain good cycling routes into the town. It has to be part of the overall strategy. Lots of comments then around competition. Can I just pick this up, Martin? From a planning perspective, you're right, retail impact assessments on retail development that might impact in the existing centre and those close by. We're not talking about retail developments here, but we are talking about consolidation of town centre uses. I think the offers in Huddersfield will be massively different to the offer in somewhere like Mirfield. I think the catchment is completely different. But I hear what you're saying. We need to be really careful about what we offer in those, because one of the points I would make is our local centres are quite strong. We have good, vibrant high streets in Lindley, Mirfield, Honley, Holmfirth, one or two others as well that don't necessarily spring to it. Cleckheaton's a good centre as well. What we don't want to do is undermine those. So it's what you offer, that is important in Huddersfield. It has to be unique, but we still want people to use their sort of local centres. So it's a really good point, and it's something that we have to have uppermost in our minds. Lots of other questions about HD1 was a key point. Yes, we have to keep an eye on HD1. It is something that we've been conscious of in terms of developing the blueprint. I don't think anything that's on the table at the moment at HD1 could ever be fitted into a town centre, and we'll have to deal with that as it comes forward. It's got a planning permission. It's about being developed, but it's a big hotel offer. It's about a ski slope. It is pretty unique. We're concentrating on making sure that Huddersfield Town Centre can actually compete with that in terms of an offer, rather than sort of being undermined by it. The other things I think I picked up was around the markets. Yes, slightly more advanced in Dewsbury than people think on markets, and we are using that expertise to feed back into what we want to do in Huddersfield Town Centre. I wouldn't want to comment on the issue around licences. I don't think I'm sort of the best person to comment on that for taxis, but I'm sure that we are going through a process of reviewing licence policies. Yeah, I don't know if somebody wants to pick up on that. They can. I think that's all I captured, but I'm pretty sure that I missed one or two points.
Yeah. Okay. We've got a couple of minutes still, so Rob, I think you wanted to come in and... Your microphone?
I'll go through things quickly, but if people want to discuss things in more detail later, please do. Right, on the environmental impact, really important. I think Richard and Martin make a point that this is a massive thing we're doing. The environmental impact of it has got to be at the centre of it. But I see it as an opportunity rather than a threat. There could be massive benefits. We're not building loads of new buildings. We're repurposing existing buildings, many of which have got an absolutely terrible environmental performance. And if you look at something like the Market Hall, something's going to have to be done with that building, because otherwise it's deteriorating. But we've got to make sure that we do it to the very highest standards. Coming back to the point about why people would come into Huddersfield, well, we need to make sure that we become an exemplar of good practice. with these buildings, make that into a feature that people will want to come and look at and admire when they come into Huddersfield. Outside spaces, we are, from the pictures, I take your point, it's not clear from the things in the basic booklets what's happening there. But there is a lot of discussion taking place about how we've got to ensure that those spaces will be sustainably usable for all sorts of different purposes. I think we've learned from places like St George's Square that great space that it is, great building, we probably didn't get it quite right in terms of how it's going to be used. So it's not just this cultural quarter. We've also been talking to people in the town about the area around the current open market and the St Peter's Gardens, because there will be cultural things happening there as well, linked to things like the food and drink and the retail offer, the co-working spaces and things like that. So all those kind of things are happening. Does link into the things about markets, that there's a lot of discussion about the markets, because what happens with the markets is absolutely central to the whole development, because we will be moving markets, we'll be concentrating things, we'll be changing the nature of them. It's going to be an important part of the town centre. The taxi things, good point, I will pass that on. Yeah, I'm surprised it's not come up again recently, because there has been a lot of work looking at licensing and changing conditions and harmonising that across West Yorkshire. So I will pass that on. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Rob. I'm very pleased. The key thing with the environmental impact. The key thing with regards to the environmental impact report, which should be in here, is it could, as you said, it could put the benefits in, as well as the adverse impacts. But the fact that we are not getting those in council reports is something that I think, through you, Chair, we should feed back to Julie Muscroft as the head of service and say, the council passed the resolution in January. Why are these not now becoming a standard part of every report that this council has? What's the point of the council passing resolutions, a lot of which are to do with writing a letter to somebody else, if the matters that are internally in our control are not being adhered to? So it should put the positives in as well as the negatives.
I want to thank you everyone for coming today. We've had a really good long discussion. Unfortunately, one of the cabinet members wasn't able to come in, but if she wants to provide us anything in writing, she can do as well, so we can minute that. Thank you very much. Really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Oh, okay. I'll give you a couple of minutes to get your tea and coffee, and then the Brexit section we're moving on to. Do you want to move down, David? Are you covering that? There 1 minute and we'll start. Okay, thank you members for a very good discussion on the town master plan, or the blueprint, should I say. We're moving on to preparations for leaving the EU, Brexit. So obviously things are still not much more clearer nationally at the moment, but we've asked previously, it's come up quite a bit in the Economy and Neighbourhoods Scrutiny panel, questions around Brexit and what preparations we are putting in place. So we've got some colleagues here with us today. We've got Sean Westerby, we've got David Bundy, and we've got Naz Parker as well here to answer questions around Brexit. Do one of you want to say something very quickly, and then we can get straight into questions, because you have received some information on this already. So I don't know if someone just wants to introduce it very quickly.
Thank you, Chair. It's worth noting that this did go to corporate scrutiny last week with Corey, so it's a response to that. Yeah, as you say, it's still quite a confused picture nationally. So the paper attempts to set out what preparations we've put in place, particularly around the initial leave date. Just a couple of overarching points to make. I think what we've tried to focus on is the impact for Kirklees as a district and Kirklees Council itself, and focusing on the sort of our resilience around the potential scenarios that may play out in the, and how that might impact various aspects of what we do and sectors. So that's been, with importantly, we've actually used existing resources and capacity to actually look at this issue at the moment. So in your paper you'll notice that we've had actual business continuity champions run tests in their service areas to actually check that scenarios are being checked out and no serious issues came back in that situation in a way. In terms of the ongoing preparedness, we're also playing into other problems like the regional resilience problem, which Sean attends quite regularly, which he absolutely loves to go to, and that's part of the regional focus. Obviously, all authorities are in a similar position, really, and we share practice around that. It will also enable us to pick up on issues like ongoing community tensions, and we have a tension monitoring process to do that. We've put a focus on our planning on particularly our vulnerable people, in our process, and that has been the focus of a lot of what we have done. I think it's important to say also we worked locally and regionally in partnership. An example of that would be the work we've done with the CCGs about the supply of medication, trying to ensure that is sustainable, whatever scenario plays out, and there's been testing around that, and also workforce issues around recruitment to social care. That's an ongoing issue that we are really looking at as well. We've also been reporting on a regular basis to MHCLG. At the highest activity, that was a daily reporting process on the issues that were affecting our authority, and that was a regional reporting process that was fed through to government and involved teleconference on a regular basis. That's now petered out, and we now report through those mechanisms on an exception basis at the moment. But without doubt, once we get to the new date of October the 31st, we will ramp up our activity and get that back into focus. So I can probably see that happening in about September's time, but that will be dictated by national events as much as anything else, really. So with your report today, you had two documents. One is the risk register, corporate risk register, an extract from that, which highlights some of the key issues that are affecting the council around this agenda. So, as you can imagine, the economic uncertainty is a key one that we are keeping an eye on, and we are engaging with business and have engaged with business on a regular basis over that. And also the potential impact of a say around community tension, not only looking at it in an active way, but proactively looking at around potential events that might, in the future, that might actually flare up. So we're taking a proactive stance on that. The second document we have is our tactical plan, which is our governance arrangements about how we actually handle this whole scenario in the council and what we would do to escalate any concerns. So I think for me, as I open gambit, that's an overview. Is that okay?
That's perfect. Is that all right? Is you don't want to add, Sean, did you want to add anything at this stage before I get questions in? Or? Okay, perfect. All right, I'm going to open it up to members now. I've got John.
I'm one of the fortunate members here because I've been through this once already. I sit on corporate scrutiny as well. But there's a couple of points which are probably more specific to this panel's area of responsibility. So there's three broad points that I'd like to make really, and two of those are kind of linked. The first one, my worry when you look at this from an economy point of view, is particularly around, from a business perspective, is probably small businesses, very small businesses, startups, market traders even, that probably haven't got the capacity and bandwidth the big companies have to do lots of scenario planning or preparation or work or something. So it's a question, and it may not be one that you can answer, but to take away to think about is, what more could we do as a council to help those very, very small, might be one-man bands or whatever it may be, in terms of helping them understand the impact and being ready to support them and pick them up if there is an impact, if something happens. That was my first point. And kind of a bit linked to that is, I had a quick look, and it might be me, I'm not great with our website, but I couldn't see a great deal on our website about preparation for Brexit. And I know that the government, you can go on government websites and there's some information for individuals and businesses. And I know some of our other local councils have done that, but I'm just thinking there's an opportunity there for us to sort of put it out there that this is the type of stuff that's available, and at least signpost, even if it's signposting to the government to say, you can find more information here, but at least we should have something there that helps with that. And my third point is probably a bit more controversial. We quite rightly are focusing a lot on the risks of us exiting the EU. But there ought to be somebody in the council that's thinking about, if we do exit the EU, are there opportunities? Because with any change of anything, and I'm not making any political points here at all, but with any change anywhere, there are always risks and opportunities. And we are quite rightly focusing on the risks. But we ought to have somebody doing that, sort of out of the box, thinking about what are the opportunities, both for us as a council, but also for our businesses in the borough. Because I don't think anybody will be thinking about that at the moment, because quite rightly everybody's focus will be on how do I mitigate any impacts there may be on my business, make sure I can still sort of operate in the same way. So they're just 3 points that I'll just kind of throw out there. Thank you.
Do you want to come back on those now, or do you want me to take some more points at this stage? Yeah, perfect. Yes.
So your point about small businesses, Councillor Taylor, is very well made, and I think my engagement with the business world, particularly through the Chamber and the Federation of Small Businesses, bears that out, because one of the questions in terms of preparedness we're trying to get them to address and understand fully is being prepared not just in the short term for the potential of a no deal, but also beyond that, or whichever way we leave, even if we leave with a deal, there needs to be some preparedness. And actually that was one of the questions we did rehearse in the Chamber session and the business engagement sessions we have, is whilst there are some catastrophic effects for certain sectors of business, there are also some real opportunities to develop new trading partnerships with different nation states and different nation businesses outside of the European partnership, but also in any new arrangement making new trading partnerships within the European Union. So just because you leave the European Union doesn't mean to say you can't continue to trade. So what terms do we want to trade on, and what types of trading do we want to do, and where are the sectoral opportunities? So that conversation is going on. I don't think we have the answers yet, and I don't think the Chamber has the answers yet, nor does the Federation of Small Businesses. In terms of the capacity of small businesses, we're putting a range of measures in, but if you were to tell me, have you measured the success of these now, so I'd probably say, one, we haven't, and two, how well they'll work is something that is an unknown at this stage. But we have talked to the Federation of Small Businesses. We're ramping up our business engagement and support agenda. Actually, the previous agenda item on town centres has meant that we've engaged with smaller businesses, the creative industries, the market traders a lot more than we might have done previously, because the combined authorities funding around business engagement and support really doesn't look at the retail sector as an important piece of the very small micro businesses as the priorities. So we are doing some work with them in terms of trying to give them the skills around, have you thought about what your business plan will do, should you? But in many instances, as you'll know better than I do, they don't even have a business plan. They just trade. They just get on with it. So it's trying to just instill some of those disciplines and thinking through how we might support them better. I was going to go on to the point on the website. I think it's a well-made one. If we're not doing it well enough, we've just engaged with our comms and marketing team. And actually, in terms of corporate capacity, the comms and marketing team are now beginning to get strengthened, and actually we're getting some good quality service. And we've got a lead identified who will help us do some of that, I think. Yeah.
If I can just come back on that small business point, I think it's not just your team, the central team, engaging with those smaller micro businesses. There are probably touch points across the whole of Kirklees. So market traders, so Chris's team. We rent a lot of properties to small businesses. We collect business rates from them all. We will have contracts with some of these small businesses in various ways. I just think we need to get that message out perhaps more broadly across the broader footprint of Kirklees about finding those opportunities to have those conversations and use our staff more broadly to help make sure that those businesses are aware. Because it's great meeting with the federations and the employers' bodies, but we all know that some people attend those, and they attend all of them, and you see the same faces all of the time. There will be other businesses that are too busy running their business to actually go to these or engage in some of these meetings. So it's looking for other touch points where we can contact people, really.
Yeah, and that was the point. Chris Cotton does work in my team in terms of markets, so and that's the engagement we have been doing with traders that you refer to. Is anybody in the council thinking about new trading relationships? Well, you'll know that the leader is very keen to open up conversations with China on the back of the Lead City Region Partnership, and has been doing that. Went on a trade mission with them. It's something that's writ large. We're also thinking about whether there's a role, one for the city region, two for Kirklees, more specifically, to look at trading partnerships with India, and he's thinking about a mission to India. So those are on. I wouldn't say we're in full throttle, but we're certainly at the beginnings of those journeys to understand what opportunities our manufacturing base in particular and our advanced engineering base in particular would have in terms of the potential for inward investment. We're talking to some large institutional investors as well around opportunities to invest in Kirklees, not only just in my world in residential housing, but also in Angela's world in terms of employment space. The local plan offers some huge opportunities and some great employment sites. So those conversations are happening. It's difficult for us as a council. We have to do a lot of this in collaboration and partnership because there's no single bit of the council or one local council. We're doing this on both a subnational, regional and a national level, working with MHCLG, working with BEIS and other government departments, particularly DTI, to try and understand how we might exploit some of the opportunities that might present. So again, we are doing that, but we're at the very beginnings of the journey. And as I said at corporate scrutiny, you know, the impacts of no deal are very unknown at this stage. You know, there's lots of speculation. So we've prepared for no deal. We did it in March. So we have a plan. We might need to tweak it as we see what the political landscape throws up and what the economic landscape throws up. But we're as prepared as we can be, I think, at this stage.
Okay, thank you. I'm just aware of time. We've still got to cover the work programme as well. So I've got Richard and Ailey, and I've got Chris as well. So I'm going to take a few together. I hope you don't mind. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, it's a terrible task you're facing here, isn't it? And all the known unknowns and all that. But it does look as though, obviously, there is a very strong chance of a no-deal Brexit. In which case, actually, we do have some knowns, but you know, not ones you might necessarily want. Anyway, I won't go there. Okay, but basically, I just wanted to ask some questions. So, first of all, about EU citizens who are resident within Kirklees. So they're obviously quite there's human rights issues, there's also issues about the role they play within the economy and so on. And it's just really, obviously, there has been, you know, the government has announced a scheme in terms of resettlement and so on, but it's just a question really about has any thought been given about obviously monitoring that and communicating with them as well? Because, you know, in certain sectors of the Kirklees economy, actually, EU citizens play a very, very important role. I'm thinking of the care sector, for example, and so on. So, and related to that as well, have any discussions been undertaken with the university at all about potential impact? I mean, that, again, it's a pretty unknown, you know, when you think about issues about the Erasmus programme and stuff. But I also wanted to ask about the opportunities, because I'm not really au fait with which European bodies, the Council, or either alone or through the West Yorkshire Combined Authority, is actually relates to the institutions of the EU. It may be there aren't any. I don't know whether we directly as an institution have some form of, or indirectly with representation on EU bodies. I don't know. You're shaking your head. Well, it's an irrelevant question. I was going to say, because in a way, that if they came to an end, obviously that would affect our opportunities, so it might be worth thinking about that. And finally, very, very difficult this, but in terms of, obviously, the Council's budget, a lot of, if you think about our procurement issues, it does strike me actually that, like any other business or even individuals, one of the big dangers that could face the Council's financial position is if there's a sudden collapse in the value of the pound, then that will obviously relatively increase our costs. And I just wondered, you know, if any thought of it has been given, if you've modelled the potential, because in terms of procurement moving forward, this could actually be quite a significant issue. So anyway, those were my thoughts, but I appreciate probably, it's going to be very difficult to answer any of them, really. Okay, thank you.
Hi, I think potentially leading on from Richard's point about, for example, a fall in the value of the pound, I was looking at page 27 in our book, and it's talking about the roles and responsibilities of the command and control structure, and I wondered if there had been any tabletop exercises or similar about the different scenarios, such as a fall in the pound. I think connected to that, on page 23, you talk about the risk assessment and saying it's not been possible to categorise the risk. And I wondered if there have been any sort of conditional risk assessments done at all to give us an indication of where we might be likely to sit should there be no deal, for example, or essentially, I'm curious about this, why it's not possible to categorise the risk. I realise there's like a lot of variables, but I wonder if there's been any sort of different scenarios planned out, which if X happens, our risk is high, if Y happens, our risk is low, for example. And my last point, on page 19, it talks about Kirklees receiving a £210,000 fund, and it does say that money's but not been ring-fenced. I just wondered if you could talk a little bit more about what this £210,000 was awarded for, and how you might use it.
It's just a very brief point. It's going on from Richard's point earlier. You're obviously thinking about the uncertainty around the labour markets. I just wonder if you've got any idea how exposed we are to that, because obviously that's going to have a long lead time in order to resolve it. It's not going to be, we're just going to get some more people. It's got a long time, a long lead time, that's it.
Okay, I'm going to take some of these. I'm going to take some of these. I'm going to leave EU citizens and impact on EU citizens to David to answer, if that's okay. On risk rating, I guess we're just waiting to see the outcome of the leadership contest. At the time when we were doing this, the scenarios moved daily. There were innumerable number of scenarios. We were seeing proposal versus counter-proposal versus tweak of proposal versus counter of tweak. And it was almost impossible to say which scenarios should we look at, which are the most likely, because it just moved daily, sometimes twice daily. So we chose not to, I guess, is the real answer to that question. Once we know what the outcome of the leadership race is and who the next Prime Minister of the UK is, I think we have a stronger likelihood of saying which scenario is likely to play out and plan for that and risk rate that. So I think there's no reason why we wouldn't, in a future update, come with a risk rating on that point. On the labour market, you're absolutely right. We have been assessing impacts. We've been looking at key sectors where we feel there's going to be a higher impact rather than, so care market people have mentioned already. Supply chains in the construction market, given the kind of the ambitious build programme, both we and our neighbouring partners have, and the country has as a whole, I guess. And we're already seeing skills and labour shortages in the construction industry, so it's something that we're working with the colleges and the university on to say, whilst we may not be able to mitigate the short-term impacts, that's not going to go away anytime soon, so we need to plan for that in the longer term. Anyway, so we may as well kick that off. There won't be any short-term fixes, I don't think. On the point about representation in EU institutions, we don't have any direct council representation. Without knowing 100%, I don't think we have any direct representation at city region level. However, it's a point well made in saying how might we use the influence of our local connections. So I think it might be helpful to identify who the MEPs are from this area and see how we might be able to work with them in a different way. I think other than the EU citizens, I've answered questions, but if anybody wants to remind me of anything I haven't answered, that would be helpful. 210. Yeah, sorry. The 210, as you'll imagine, is a pithy amount to prepare for Brexit. However, and it's spread over 2 years, what we've done is, because we have a pretty well-oiled machine in our emergency planning team and how we respond to incidents, what we've used that is a core base, and we've used that resource from which to plan for and say what are the things that might play out that might be different to what we would be used to doing before. But most of the things fall into our emergency planning type of framework, so we haven't needed to use that 210 unless somebody tells me we've spent some without me knowing. So that's the approach we're taking. I think there's a broader question about the shocks to the system, economic system, and how resilient is the council in being able to respond to that, particularly in things like the fall in the pound, massive hike in interest rates, a rise in tender prices, which is the specific point you've made. Again, it's without playing out loads of scenarios and doing sensitivity analyses on different potentials. What we've done is we've got a strategic reserve which is there to enable us to deal with shocks. So rather than saying this is a Brexit pot, we could call it a Brexit pot, but it's actually just it's a strategic risk reserve that we have that will enable us to try and ride any storms that we might hit. Yeah.
Yeah, on the EU resettlement scheme, we have had a very proactive push, both internally and externally, to employees and also to our communities team, to make sure people are aware of the implications of that and to support people through the process. That is an ongoing process that we are playing out now. So we've regularly communicated as with staff, and the outreach workers we have have identified some people who need support for that, so that support is being offered.
Do you want me to touch on the exercises? Because that is my world. Yeah, a minute and a half. So, the resilience world is massive out there, and we do work in partnership. So, back end of last year, we took part in a West Yorkshire, Yorkshire and Humber exercise to test out some of the scenarios that might happen. It's a very unknown. It's broad-based, so it's just more like getting people together, getting their connections. But we have done that, and more locally, we've done some testing out of key service areas. So if you look at school meals, we spoke to school meals and just said, like, what would you do if you can't get your fresh food? And some of the answers are back is that we go to tinned, we change menus, go to dry goods. So services have tried to think through things logically, how they would respond, but a lot of this stuff is so unknown, we can only ask broad questions until we get more detail.
Thank you for coming along, colleagues. Appreciate that. I know we've kind of had to rush through that a little bit. Quite a lot of this will be picked up, I think, in the future with the corporate scrutiny committee. But if there were any other specific points that we want to bring back in terms of the economy and economic resilience, we can certainly follow that up with colleagues here and perhaps get a monitoring report back on that. So we'll do that. All right, thank you very much, colleagues. Appreciate that. I'm going to quickly move on to the work programme. So, in your agenda pack, there is a working draft work programme. This has been seen by the Overview Scrutiny and Management Committee, and I'll be going back to the committee next Monday as well with any potential changes we might want to make to this, any amendments that members may have. So I'm just going to ask members if they've got anything they want to add to this or if anything needs to be changed. So I'm going to start with John and then move on to Richard.
There's a couple of things actually. One thing that I think should come to this panel but appears to be missing is around planning. Specifically, I would like to see, following the adoption of the local plan, when we adopted the local plan, there were a load of supporting policies that needed developing to support that local plan. And I'd like to see what progress is being made on those and where they're getting to with those. I think that is deserving of scrutiny. There is a mention in here under sustainable transport about Section 106 monies, but I think there's a broader piece of work we need to do related to planning around the implementation of SIL, the Community Infrastructure Levy, and Section 106. And I think to Martin's point as well earlier, and the point you made yourself around Section 106, I've had experience in my ward as well of very poor processes in terms of that process from initial engagement with developer to defining what contributions are going to be made, when those contributions are going to be provided to the council, what the council then does with them, what consultation there is with local members and communities, if any, and how that is all tracked all the way through. And I think we need to have a bit of a deep dive on that because it is not fit for purpose. So that was on planning. Secondly, another one that I think is missing, or I'm not sure which section it would fit into, is this ward-based squads that are coming out to visit us once or twice a year. I'd like to see some feedback on that because, again, my experience of that has been relatively poor, and I think that needs a little bit more scrutiny about what they are able or not able to do, what successes they've had, what learnings they've had,
and how are they going to make the process better as we go forward. Because I think it's a valuable thing to do, but we're not getting there yet. And a bit related to that, this council has talked for the last 18 months or so about having place-based officers, so that we're dealing with the same officers all of the time. I'd like to know where that is, because there's no sight of that in council, and I think we should be asking some questions around that. And then finally, just on the digital strategy, just to add to the digital strategy, what are we doing about the impact outside of those already defined areas, so the more rural areas? You would expect me to ask these sort of questions about what are we doing to support those more rural areas in terms of making sure they have fit for purpose and future-proofed digital access, because at the moment we've got this gigabyte from City Fibre that's coming in to the urban areas. You get outside of those urban areas, nothing, and it almost feels like Kirklees' policy is if you want a good internet connection, you have to commute in. That doesn't feel like the right answer to me. Thank you.
That noise gets me every time. Anyway, right. Looking at the economic strategy, I think there's some stuff has arisen really, because we spent a lot of time quite rightly looking at KES last time, and what I would like to discuss, first of all, if you look at the first bullet point in terms of inward investment strategy, I think it would be useful to sorry, I'm not going to sound like a monomaniac here, but I'll have to say it, is issues around alternative sources of finance, around for environmental and perhaps alternative energy and stuff like that, which is obviously a new issue that's arising even as we speak because of changes. And I'd like also to consider how obviously we're committed to a community wealth building inclusive growth strategy as an authority. So similarly, how given the increased importance of environmental climate change issues, that aligns with that policy. So because that is a moving target, and I assume that's part of our role really, is to keep looking at how strategies and policies change in the light of reality. The other thing I wanted to bring up, in terms of the towns and communities in Kirklees, we've spent a lot of time on Huddersfield. Obviously I represent the Combe Valley. I'm sure we all represent different, bits of. I think it would be useful to actually start looking at smaller towns and communities. Home. I don't need to spell it out, yeah. Not just Batley, Dewsbury, but also places like, Slough, Murfield, yeah, God forbid we leave out Murfield, right, yeah, so that's the other thing I would suggest. The other thing I think I've noticed is that we've got a kind of split between our full panel discussion and lead member briefing monitoring, and there's basically housing is down as as a lead member one. And I mean, I take the point, we've discussed stuff like homelessness, rough sleeping strategy, certainly adequate. I don't think we need to revisit that. But in terms of the relationship with K&H, we've never discussed that. And this is a massively important issue on all sorts of levels, actually. So I would hope that was actually discussed as well, please, yeah.
Richard? Martin, so we are going slightly over. Hope that's okay. So hopefully we'll try and wrap it up in the next couple of minutes or so. Okay, Chris.
Just very briefly, in the waste strategy, I don't actually see anything about focusing on businesses and getting them to reduce their waste. So there are a lot of single-use plastics around the town. That could be something we add.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I don't know about going over because all it says on the agendas is the start time. We never have a finish time. So, and obviously it's important for scrutiny. The process, first of all, it says here that following our discussion, it will be taken forward to the Management Committee and work will commence on developing the panel's work schedule. So does that mean that they're going to tell us what we can do in the order? Because there's nothing here that we are taking forward in priority, and I think that's important. Looking at the specifics, the sustainable transport issues I think are key, because as we've heard today, how a bus service links with the local plan, I mean that's a very short discussion. It doesn't. When you bring through the local plan major development areas such as the Dewsbury Riverside, the economic zones that we've got at Lindley and Murfield that have got no bus services serving them, that should be a very short panel discussion. How does it link? It doesn't. The question about should it is something I would like to see us taking on. The issue about 106, and again that talks about public transport, I would hope colleagues would support that we widen that to look at the effectiveness of the whole prior to SIL, because if you start getting the community infrastructure levy and the administration is still faulty, you're wasting money. Cycling and walking strategic framework, there is no strategy or policy overarching in Kirklees and indeed in West Yorkshire for cycling. We have massive targets of a 300% increase in West Yorkshire of cycling numbers, but nobody, and I challenged this at West Yorkshire last week, nobody can produce the West Yorkshire strategy of how they're going to do it. What we've got is disjointed, sometimes ill thought out spending, either on the local cycling walking plans, building infrastructure, where if you look at a map of Kirklees of the cycling infrastructure, there's lots of it disjointed. You've got a Meltham Greenway, a Fenny Greenway going out towards Kirkburton, the Calder Valley Greenway. There's no joined up network. I mean, thankfully Sustrans have now made money, so we need to look at this and say, never mind a framework, we want a strategy and a policy. The point has been made again about lead member. The issue about air quality, the consultation is flawed. Kirklees in 2005 signed a charter with parish and town councils that would involve them in all major decisions affecting their area. The air quality report was not sent to parish and town councils for consultation, because I put it on the agenda at Murfield and the clerk confirmed that. So we're missing out a key demographic. Yeah, we've got elected representatives in these areas who are concerned in their area. There is missing data. They're only working on the air quality zones they have. They couldn't tell me about traffic congestion lengths in our area. So the air quality data is flawed. So, and we mentioned the homelessness. I think we ought to have that back for review to see how Kirklees are doing on the measurable targets of reducing homelessness and rough sleeping. We've criticised that and looked at it in the past couple of years about saying that addressing rough sleeping for the relatively low numbers that officers tell us should be something which we can actually make a positive impact on. And I think periodically we ought to ask officers, right, what are you doing and are you on target to reducing or eradicating it? But which of these are we going to bring forward, and which is we as a panel see as a priority, and does that get overruled by the Management Committee?
Okay, thank you for all your suggestions. So we do have to take this forward to Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee on Monday. I'll certainly feed back all the points that have been made here. Some of it can get overruled by that management committee, because what they're doing is they're looking at all the scrutiny panels and saying, is this the right place for it to come to, or should it go to different scrutiny panels? So on one of the points here on the economic strategy, the inclusive growth strategy, we have been told that will go to Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee recently. So that was something that Liz brought up, didn't she, as well? So we'd probably have to take that one off our one, and it'd be looked at a wider level. So they do have a say on it, but I'll certainly be making the key points about the things that we want to raise In terms of priority, I'm happy to sort of work with members on that and making sure that we prioritise the ones that we think is most relevant in the timetable. So I know we're a bit short of time right now, but I can certainly, if people want to get in touch with us to say which ones they do want to prioritise, and what we'll do is we'll have this as a rolling part of the agenda, so we can move things around as we see it as well throughout the year. And we can also, obviously, please do email Sheila if you something's coming and saying, I want this moved up on the agenda, this is something that should come next month, or we should be looking at rough sleeping perhaps in the winter months and just getting an update then. Yeah, okay, so, you know, perhaps we get someone in before then as well, but I know it's going to, there's going to be some discussion at council tonight about that as well, isn't there, at full council, so. Is that all right for now? Is it okay if we wrap things up for now? Thank you, members, for coming along. Thank you to the Youth Council. We've still got one here today. We do have to go, so thanks for staying. I'm just going to quickly mention, we did go through the dates of the upcoming meetings, just when we had our pre-meeting, just want to check that members have that in their diaries now, that they're happy with the dates. It's going to be generally on a Thursday at 2 o'clock, and the dates have been provided to members. If there are any issues, please do raise them with us. Is that all right, Sheila? So the boss says it's okay to end things right now. So thank you, everybody, and thank you for whoever's listening today as well. Thank you.